Welcome to Chicana Revolution. Our webinar today is Movidas for Chicana Studies, a collective oral history with founding educators. My name is Dionne Espinoza, and I'm a professor in the Department of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Cal State LA. I'm also the project director of the Chicana Revolution series. Before we begin our program, I want to take care of some housekeeping items. So one, the event is being recorded. The chat is available. Please keep the chat a safe space during the event. Place your questions in the Q&A box. These will be reviewed at the end of the session by Dr. Reina Rodríguez, who will be facilitating the Q&A section. We ask that you fill out a survey for this session. The link is in the chat with information to put in the chart fields, and we thank you for your feedback. So you'll see that link in the chat in a minute, and it'll say the name of the project that you would input is Chicana Revolution, and the title of the event is Movidas for Chicana Studies. This event was made possible through the Humanities for All Quick Grant, a project of California Humanities, a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Visit www.calhum.org. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of California Humanities or the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you to Cal Humanities for your support. Before we formally start, I'd like to extend a special thanks to the wonderful panelists, Enriqueta Chavez, Sonia Lopez, Dorinda Moreno, NietoGomez, Rita Sanchez, and Corinne Sanchez. Without their work, those of us running this webinar would not be here. Mil gracias to Dr. María Cotera, who's moderating the collective oral history and worked with me and the Mujeres to develop the program. I also want to thank and acknowledge Dr. Reina Rodríguez, who's going to be helping me run the webinar and who will be facilitating the Q&A segment. Extended bios of all these wonderful participants will be placed in the Google Doc in the chat. Oh, actually, they're going to be placed in the chat. Finally, thank you to Jeffrey Lamb of Cal State LA Accessibility Services. Also, thank you to the live captioner, Emily Kronk, and Marla Ulloa, Media Services Specialist. It takes a village to run a webinar, as I found. At this point, it's important to honor the land we are on. The land acknowledgement will be read by Dr. Reina Rodríguez, a co-facilitator of this program and a Cal State LA graduate. Dr. Rodríguez received her BA and her MA at Cal State LA, and then went on to complete her PhD in feminist studies at the University of Minnesota. So now,
thank you.
Yes,
Dionne. With great respect, Cal State LA acknowledges the Tongva people as the traditional caretakers of Tovangar, the Tongva world, including the Los Angeles Basin, South Channel Islands, San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, and portions of Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. Cal State LA is located within these lands. As an institution located on unceded Tongva land, we pay our respect to the ancestors, elders, and our relatives' relations, past, present, and emerging. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Cal State LA more accountable to the needs of American Indian peoples. This was prepared by Dr. Kimberly Robertson, Muskogee, and Tongva Elder Julia Bogani. Feel free to acknowledge the lands that you are on in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Reina. So let me tell you a little bit about the Chicana Revolution series. The Chicana Revolution series puts the voices of Mexican-American women at the center in curated panels dedicated to sharing the underrepresented stories of the mujeres who formed student and community-based collectives in the 70s at universities and community sites throughout California. The first panel in this series featured Las Chicanas, a group that came together at San Diego State College in the early 1970s. You can find that program on the YouTube channel, Chicana Revolution. So look up Chicana Revolution, YouTube, you'll see it. Today is the second installment. The third installment, to be presented in spring 2023, will feature Concilio Mujeres in the Bay Area and the projects associated with the work of Dorinda Moreno, including poetry, performance, and global Chicana activism. These events are also roughly timed as 50-year Chicana-versaries. So thank you for being here. Now I'm happy to hand off the program to Doctora María Cotera. Doctora Cotera is Associate Professor in the Mexican American and Latino Studies program at UT Austin and co-founder of the Chicana por Mi Raza Digital Memory Project, an online archive of oral histories and material culture documenting Chicana feminist praxis from 1965 to 1985. Drawing on her research in this area, she will moderate this historic reconnection with some of the key founders of Chicana Studies in California. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Dionne. I'm going to share my screen now. So we have a few images to share with you to illustrate the stories that these mujeres are going to share with us. I feel so honored to be in this space, both with the women who have been such a deep influence on me and my thinking and on my praxis, and also with all of you. I've just been looking through the names, and I'm so excited to see so many familiar names, and I'm so honored that you have joined us this evening. So for this webinar in the Chicana Revolution series, we've brought together 6 women who were instrumental in the development of early Chicana feminist studies in California between 1969 and the mid-1970s. NietoGomez and Corinne Sanchez, who were co-founders of Las Hijas de Cuauhtémoc, and Ana went on to teach some of the first La Chicana class at Northridge. Corinne also and Ana developed the Estudios Femeniles, the first published Chicana curriculum. We also have Sonia Lopez and Enriqueta Chavez, who are founding members of Las Chicanas de San Diego. Like Ana NietoGomez and the other women on our panel, they also taught the original classes on La Chicana under the Mexican American Lifestyles rubric at San Diego State, and were instrumental in forming a network of Chicanas to promote Chicana studies across California. We also have Rita Sanchez, who taught some of the first classes on La Chicana at Stanford University and published a series of Chicana anthologies that featured writing from women in her classes. And finally, we have Dorinda Moreno, a founder of Raza Studies at San Francisco State University and Concilio Mujeres, a resource clearinghouse for women in the community of the Mission District. Their activities at the intersection of Chicano studies and Chicana studies are a critical chapter in our shared intellectual genealogy, and they have much to teach us about how we produce knowledge at the intersection of multiple sitios y lenguas, to quote historian Emma Perez. We bring them together tonight not only to illuminate a hidden history of Chicano studies, but also because their network movidas and modalities of struggle, and we identify these as movidas drawing from our book Chicana Movidas, give us a much deeper understanding of Chicana feminist studies as both an analytic and a praxis, meaning putting theory into practice and having practice inform theory. In the conversation that follows, we'll focus on what brought these women to Chicano studies, how they formed critical networks at the intersection of multiple struggles, and how their teaching and knowledge-making movidas built an archive for Chicana feminism in both the academy and the community. We really hope that this plática will generate many questions and ideas about the practice of Chicana feminism today, both inside and outside the Academy. So we're going to begin with some introductions really about how these mujeres came into the field of Chicano studies and what it was like at that time. So we're going to ask them to share a little bit about their background as activist scholars and what brought them to the movimiento and to the movement for Chicano studies. I'm going to stop share so we can see them as they respond. And I think we decided we're going to do this in alphabetical order, right? Let's see if I know my alphabet. That means that we start with Enriqueta Chavez.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. Putting this program has been really exciting and has brought a lot of memories. I grew up in the Imperial Valley and was one of the first EOP students to come to San Diego State. There was a group of about 60 to 70 of us. And very soon, as I got to San Diego State, I became involved in META and also other activities that were taking place at that time. It was in 68, 69. And 70, 71, when a lot of things were happening. The women's movement was happening. Of course, the Chicano movement, the farm workers movement, the Black Panther movement, the Vietnam War, against the Vietnam War, and many other activities were taking place at the time. And so that led me to become involved and participate in the Chicano movement and become involved in politics and social justice and all the things that we did at that time. And it was an exciting time and a lot of activity. And of course that brought us to, dealing with men, Chicano men and other men, not Chicano, that had different views about what women could accomplish. And so that's when I said, no, wait, and became involved in trying to do something about it, and led me to creating and working with other women like Sonia Lopez in the development of Chicana Studies. Muchas gracias, and thank you for joining us again this evening.
Should I go next?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Sonia Lopez. I came in as a transfer student in 1968 to San Diego State. I grew up very poor. I went to a school in Heber, California, which probably nobody has heard. And my experience in the elementary and the educational system motivated me to get an education in spite of having no role models, having no money, and very determined. So I came into San Diego State through EOP. I was older than Queta, older than the other ones, so to speak. Eventually, I joined Mecha, which was in the transition of being a social club and a political club at that point. And with time, I got involved in the movement because we were in the middle of the civil rights movement, 1968 at San Diego State. You had the Black Panthers, you had the farm workers, and coming from a farm worker background, we all identified. I became involved in all kinds of activities and with other women, Queta, we realized that we did all the work and we didn't get the credit. And so at that point, that's when we were meeting people like Corinne and Anna, because we met at conferences, right? We met at whether it was a Raza Unida conference or a meeting up in the Bay Area because of the Plan de Santa Barbara conference was going to come about. And so that's how we connected. And so at that point, that's how we started talking about making our voices heard. Thank you.
Is it me next, Moreno?
It's you next. Yes, Dorinda.
It's a pleasure and an honor to participate and to think of each of you in the special ways that we met in the 70s. And my family came from Nuevo Mexico to California. And so I know 101 and 10 very well, lots of visits back and forth from New Mexico to California. And my parents were, I think we picked cotton and grapes and everything along the way, inching ourselves to a survival mode in the streets of San Francisco. And we were there a few years before my father saved money from all of the picking that we did. And children picked, I picked, and this was between, say, 5 years old until about 12 was the last time that I actually remember the picking in the wonderful California orchards of prunes and string beans and everything that growed. California was beautiful to us because what we remembered about New Mexico was my parents were part of the Salt of the Earth family, and my father went to work in the mines. And what we remember is the mud and the poverty and the sickness, because on both sides of my family, we were contracting both TB and influenza. And we came to California because I had an aunt in an infirmary and an uncle as well. I served as her gopher from age 5 at her bedside because she was bedridden, and a reader and a person with a lot of skills. And so I grew with her as a child in her interests, which were social, political interests. So through the 50s, well prepared me for the 60s. And the 60s in San Francisco, it's a gem of an organizing methodology with all of the groups that have already been mentioned. And I started with MAPA and the great Margaret Cruz, Viva Kennedy campaigns. I worked with both the Jack Kennedy campaign and the Bobby Kennedy campaign, and lots of campaigns in between those in the bushes and on. So there was efforts to start a Chicano party, and I think out of Sacramento State. And Jose Angel came to California and introduced La Raza Unida party. So between all of the movements that were going on from Basta Ya and of course the Panthers, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, I was sort of, and I saw myself as a journalist. And so I was going from, organization to organization, meeting people, because San Francisco is that way. We were a multicultural community and everyone was engaging. I started volunteering with the United Farm Workers, one of my first, and met, well, the original organizer was also someone that we all went to school with. So we grew up as a family of activists, actually, in the early 70s. And coming together with all of the groups was just a natural. Finally, attending the Santa Barbara conference with Olga Arenivar, another San Francisco State staffer. And I started right away because of the San Francisco strike. We won that strike and got our the ability to put our own department together. So we hired our teachers, developed our curriculum, and my mom used to describe me as state volunteer, and Dorinda's hand goes up because I was working not only in the administration office of San Francisco State, but also with Margaret and also with, community organizations, as I mentioned, WILF and all of those. And that was the point of winning the strike, was developing our curriculum to be community-based. So El Tecolote was started right then, and it's been ongoing all of this long time, a bilingual newspaper. And then I started also working with developing our newspaper. I started it at Stanford. And during this time, I was invited to Mexico to the Museo de Antropología e Historia, 6-week seminar by Dr. Chavarria, who was at Santa Barbara as well. And I was amongst 100 men, mostly. There was about 6 women that I recall. There might have been a couple more, but we were under 10 women in that 100 men. And it's a program that's very little known. At the same time as that program was going on, it was a curriculum development program. And the reason why I was involved was to bring back as much as I could on the information on La Mujer, because at San Francisco State, of course, there wasn't a lot of materials, and we had to, I'm always been a collector, so I had a lot of, whether it was La Raza magazine or the publications that Ana, that you're putting together, we all sort of blossomed at the same time with, making all of the resources work for our work that had no precedent and that we were able to put together. So we worked very well with women's studies, with Black studies. At the same time, Alcatraz was going on, and my parents from New Mexico, I thought Richard Oakes was my cousin because they looked alike, and so I started, because Native American studies was so small, there was certainly great teachers, but they weren't on campus because they were, teaching at others. And so what was going on at San Francisco State with post the strike and with the Alcatraz occupation was just one of those things where you get taken by the power of movimiento and uniting and always fighting as a Chicana, the powers that be, which were the men who told us we were dividing the movement, and some of the remembered activities and events were a real joke. And then we were also, greeting people from from Mexico and Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and those were times to really negotiate the differences of how we approached not only our cultural activities at home, but our politics. And being a Chicana, we could not comfortably organize as Chicanos. We had to organize as everything else. And that was about the time of the 16-point program of the Hispanic. And so we fought the word Hispanic like everyone else, the panicked Hispanics. But Chicana was always really very important to my childhood and to my growing up, because being a devotee to even Salt of the Earth, which I finally saw when I was 19 and introduced that to San Francisco State as part of our curriculum. Um, um, I just want to say a word about Virginia Chacon. I took her to her 50th anniversary of Salt of the Earth. And my parents, having that character of New Mexico of helping the community survive. San Francisco greeted so many people from everywhere, Boricuas, El Salvador, the diaspora. And so it was a perfect place to just be that rebel that needed to be there at San Francisco State, taking it on, because it was not an easy narrative that was prefabricated. We had to develop, and was so gifted by having such great comadres everywhere. I mean, we came together by the dozens, and we formed Concilio Mujeres and other groups. So 50 years later, I say, strong, 50 years still standing and not standing still.
Thank you, Dorinda.
So much more to do, and this is a great team that will get to that 50 years forward, future thinking, developing from what we're doing today. Gracias, Dionne and Maria.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dorinda. I think, Ana, you're next. Would you like to say?
My family came from Arizona and New Mexico. Both sides of my family worked for the Santa Fe Railroad during World War II. They moved on to San Bernardino in 1943. My mom worked for as a car clerk, and then later a secretary for the Santa Fe Railroad for 40 years. And my dad worked for the Norton Air Force Base as an aeronautics quality control inspector from 1950 to 1967. I was born and raised in San Bernardino, California. It's a railroad town, and it had been segregated most of my life until NAACP filed a discrimination suit to desegregate the town in the early 1970s. I did not experience a desegregated San Bernardino until after I graduated from college. I went to Cal State Long Beach in 1967 and joined the Chicano civil rights movement around the spring of 1968. Then I became a Chicana feminist activist in 1969. However, I didn't go to college to become an activist. My parents considered a college education a form of life insurance so that I would always be able to provide for my family, and so I could help my future husband to provide a better life for my future children. However, college life was difficult. I felt like I was living on another galaxy. In addition, I had to deal with upfront class, race, and gender prejudices everywhere, every day. I knew wherever there was racism, violence was not far behind. And I felt alone because I did not have parents or aunts or uncles or cousins to protect me. For example, waiters refused to serve me at restaurants because I was not white. When my college guidance counselor looked at my test scores, he then said to me, "You're going to be a sociology major." And I asked, "Well, what's sociology?" And he said, "It doesn't really matter. You're going to drop out of college anyway and have lots of babies." Similarly, a professor told me at Cal State Long Beach, "Don't waste my time. We both know you're going to fail my class. It's just a matter of time before you get pregnant and drop out." I didn't take their words personally. As far as I was concerned, their parents did not raise them to be polite and respectful. Eran mal educado. Besides, no matter what they said, I had a job to do, and that was graduate. My life changed in the spring of 1968 when I saw a Chicano walking around campus holding a picket sign, and it had a strange looking word printed on it. So I sounded the word aloud, one syllable at a time, and I said, Chicano, Chicano. I knew this word. However, I had never seen the word written down on paper, much less a picket sign. All my life, I had always heard people in my community say, soy Chicano, y soy de aquí. I identified with this word. In fact, I called myself a Chicana and I was proud to be one. I often heard people say, somos Chicanos y somos de aquí. This was a statement of self-validation. It was a way of saying, we are who we are. We are of this land, we belong here, and we're not going anywhere. Somos Chicanos was a declaration of equality to others. It meant we refuse to kneel to those who consider themselves better than us. Somos Chicanos y somos de aquí meant if you want us to be like you, that's your problem. We don't make any apologies for who or what we are. The Chicana experience is a unique one. We are a new culture. We are a fusion of the new and old cultures of the Americas. Even more, our belief systems result from our historical experience on the way from here to there. Our culture is in the making. We are free to combine the old with the new and invent something different along the way. As you can see, when I saw the word Chicana, it filled me with joy and it made me feel welcome on campus. The man with the picket sign invited me to attend the meeting of a new student organization. They called it United Mexican American Students. He referred to it as UMAS, and he promised me I would meet Raza who were like me. At the meeting, the UMAS president, Jerry Juarez, said, here at UMAS, we do not have to do it alone. People gain success because someone helped them along the way. Here at UMAS, we can help each other achieve our educational goals. This is where Raza thrives and graduates. In addition, he said, if you join UMAS, you can help us increase the representation of Chicano people on this campus. Together, we can build a Mexican American Studies department where we can learn about our history, learn about our struggle to gain our civil rights, help UMAS fight racial discrimination, and raise the public awareness about the wrongs of racism. After the meeting, I said to myself, I never thought about becoming an activist. I had accepted having to live with racism and sexism for the rest of my life. I never imagined having the power to eliminate prejudice and hate. But now I felt I no longer have to deal with prejudice alone. With UMAS, we can change things. That's how I joined the movement.
Thank you, Ana. Next, we'll hear from Corinne, your co-conspirator
Yes,
of these
I'm
activities.
so happy to be here, and many things of my colleagues and sisters here, they're just duplicates of all of us because we pretty much went through the same paths. But I'm also a junior college graduate and transfer student to a state college. And Ana and I both went to the same junior college and the same state college. And we became, as she stated, involved with UMAS, United Mexican American Students. He later became MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, which was a more progressive or radical part of our movement. I became very involved with both UMAS and MECHA, and like a good soldier, fell in line with doing the work that needed to be done, that I was trained as a young person. I come from a family of 8, also born in San Bernardino. But I think what really triggered my involvement more seriously were all the issues that were confronting us at the time, which included the Vietnam War, Reyes Tejerina's New Mexico land rights struggle, the women's movement, the Great Boycott, the Católicos por la Raza. I mean, I could go on with various movements that Ana and I were pretty much involved with. And in those various activities, we fasted, we marched, we joined together to protest the inequities, the injustices, and what we called sexism and racism. We felt very strongly that those things be erased and removed. So I think I'm most proud, not only that we, Ana and I, hung together and developed Hijas de Guatemoc, and we really, again, marched on the campus and very proudly met privately on the campus to discuss the issues we were facing. And we got involved with our bodies ourselves, and it just created an opening. It was a door opening and a life opening, a vision of who we really were as women. So I really want to say that it was power to the people. It was fighting sexism, racism. It was being self-determined. It was being independent and choosing. And that battle that we fought at Long Beach State continues to this very day. So I say to the listeners and the participants, this is a lesson learned. It goes on through our life. And together as women and people who are like us and like what we're talking about is the power within all of us and together. I'm so happy to be here with you. I just want to say lastly, I'm still working and I'm running a nonprofit in the San Fernando Valley, which works with the same struggles and the same problems and rights for our people. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here too, and so proud of what Corinne and Ana especially said, because we have so much in common. We're all from San Bernardino. My parents were, my father worked for the Santa Fe Railroad. And in fact, my grandfather was killed in an accident at the Santa Fe Railroad. And that's another amazing story that has to do with the railroad. My father was introduced to the union practices when he was working for the Santa Fe Railroad. And he protested that he had to buy from a company store because the prices were so high. And they told him he could say anything he wanted and that he was free to speak out by the union members. However, the next day he was fired. However, again, the change came to San Bernardino. The company store was no longer there. So I see my dad as a hero in that respect. I'm 7th of 11 children from that working class family in San Bernardino. But I was a dreamer. I had thoughts of my own. And well, I guess my story begins 50 years ago. That's why I'm wearing this badge, because I just celebrated my 50th college reunion. So right out of high school, I thought my life had ended. After 1 year of college, I left my family in San Bernardino and married my college sweetheart and thought I was going to do something very different and perfect. And I went to work in the Bay Area to put him through undergraduate and law school. And that's how it was in those days. The options for women were very limited. He passed the state bar and I had 2 children to raise and no degree of my own. So that's how my story begins. And I guess that's how I became an activist too, because I had sort of given up. I thought if I failed at this one thing that was so important to my family and to me and to my life, I must be a failure. I recognized that it wasn't, if it were not for the mentors in my life that I had met along the way, that I would not have succeeded. One of them was my sister, María Sanchez. She was a California state leader. One of 2 students, 2 women, 2 young girls at San Bernardino High School in 1952. And she was sent to Sacramento at a girls' state conference. she said, no, my father will never let me go. But teachers came to the home and we learned that it would better her life, and it did. She became an award-winning journalist. But I wanted to follow in her footsteps, and to a degree did, but not to the degree that she did. But at Stanford, I met, in 1970, I met Antonia Castañeda. She was a grad student in history, and she was the first person to teach Chicana, a Chicana course at the University of Washington in 1968. I was in awe of her, just like I was in awe of NietoGomez, Dorinda Moreno, when I met them. Who are these women? And she said to me when I got there, lost and lonely, she said, "You're not alone." And she quoted, I remember, from this beautiful Aztec poem. And I was studying literature and poetry, and I thought that's all I was going to do at Stanford and get a job. But that's not what happened. She said, we're all connected. We all belong to one another. Unos de nosotros, unos de los otros. And I just love that phrase. It's in a book that she eventually published called Chicana. It's called Literatura Chicana. You may find it somewhere online. It's a classic. But it's just remnants of the Chicano culture. Leaders like Antonia, though, and my sister Mary, they were out there. They just were never recognized. And so I give credit to them so much today. And that first year at Stanford was momentous. It was 1970, and I was invited to it was 1969, because that was the orientation. I went to an orientation, and a Chicana came up to me and said, we're having a meeting right now. Are you a Chicana? And I just looked at her and I said, yes. And I went to the orientation. I learned about the Chicano moratorium had just happened the day before, and participants had been suffered in that. And it caused injury to them and to others and families. And well, that was the day that Ruben Salazar was killed. He was a Los Angeles Times reporter, and a tragedy for Chicanos. So I guess from that point on, the message to my children and to my students was that equity and justice is what we're seeking. I guess this cry for justice was in the air, and I was eager to learn more. So I began to apply my studies as an English major to what was happening in the world. One of the only English majors at the university, and not just me, but probably every university it was like that. And so I was invited to join committees, and just because I was an English major, everybody said, you do the writing, or you speak, you come to the presentation. So last 50 years, and thank you for being there, everybody here.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories of becoming Chicano and Chicana, more particularly. And that leads me to a second line of inquiry, which is really about your whole experience of the woman's question in the Chicano movement. I'm using old style language, right? Because this is how it was often presented, within Chicano movement discourse. I'll go to the slide, and so we can look at some, that's not the right slide. All right, stop share. I'll figure out that technical difficulty as you're talking, but I want to put the question to you now about, how you all, and this is open to anyone on the panel, what kinds of gendered contradictions did you face within the Chicano movement? Some of you have discussed, what, some of these contradictions of the men. I recall, Enriqueta saying, the men kind of taking the leadership roles while the women were doing all the work. So I would like to know something about that context and what it was like and what motivated you to understand that Chicano studies wasn't enough, that you also needed Chicana studies.
Well, can I begin? Two things: gender discrimination in Mecha and gender exclusion in Mexican American Studies Department got us, Corinne and I, and the Chicanas at Cal State Long Beach going. It all began when the men in the organization complained that not enough women joined the organization. And then when women joined and went to the meetings, the men complained that the women were interrupting their meetings. For example, after the Mecha meetings, the Mecha president called me to his office and asked me to explain, what did Norma mean when she said this? And what did Martha mean when she said that? And I told him, well, ask him, how am I supposed to know? He says, well, you're the Chicana, you're the meta, you should know what they meant. And I said, I don't. You need to talk to them. Well, his solution, rather than talking to them and hearing them and why they were asking these questions, he came up with the idea of separating the women into a separate committee. However, I was too trusting and too loyal a soldier to comprehend this strategy. So in 1969, the Mecha president asked him and Corinne and I to form a women's orientation committee for new female recruits. Now, Corinne and I had met at San Bernardino Junior College. And the way we met was that there was an old library and a new library, and I went to the old library to hide from my friends because they were just a wonderful group, and they would come looking for me so that we could go out and eat or have some fun. And in this little niche, there was Corina studying hard, and she was doing the same thing. And we both had the same goal. We were trying to get good grades and graduate from college, from the junior college, so we could go on to Cal State Long Beach. So that's how we met back then. The movement hadn't started, but in San Bernardino. But by the time I saw her again at Cal State Long Beach, it had started in San Bernardino, and she had joined that organization. And I saw this letter from her. She had written Mecha or UMAS and said, what you guys doing? I'm in the UMAS organization over here, and I'd like to know what you're doing over there. And I said, oh yeah. So that's how we connected. We became roommates and we became allies. She covered my back, I covered hers. So together we started the Chicanas de Aztlán. We never thought to ask why there was no orientation committee for new members. But we nevertheless started a women's orientation committee for new female recruits. And we called ourselves Chicanas de Aztlán. We studied the issues in the civil rights movement. However, gender discrimination and sexual harassment in Mecha became more prominent at every level of functioning. For example, one day my mother visited the Mecha office and scolded the men for their behavior, and they just laughed at her and walked away. I felt the guys felt safe to act so disrespectfully because my mom did not know their moms, and my cousins didn't know their cousins. We did not have a social network to hold them accountable. As a result, the committee evolved into an advocacy group, and we attempted to find a safe place for women to organize. And finally, we just started meeting outside of the office. Then we began to look at why Chicanas were dropping out of college. We knew women had higher grade point averages than the men, so we had to find out what was driving them out. And we we began to carve out the issues that Chicanas faced in higher education. And one of the major issues that was driving them, well, there were two. One, there wasn't any support for Chicanas to be in campus, either in the system, the larger system on campus, or in Mecha. Second, birth control, lack of access to birth control was a factor that was going on. And women were dropping out because they were pressured to have kids, they were pressured to get married, they were pressured to have kids, or they had unplanned pregnancies. And so we even had a student who died from, at that time, remember, 1969, abortion was illegal. And we've come full circle now. And there was a Chicana who was an EOP student, and I met with her. I saw her at the emergency room. She was a tiny girl. I'm a big girl. She was a tiny girl. She put her little hand on my hand, and she grabbed it, and she said, "Don't tell my dad I'm pregnant. He'll kill me if he does." And she died of hemorrhaging to death because she had attempted to abort herself by putting a Coca-Cola bottle inside her uterus, and she ripped herself apart. So then we began to study birth control. Or, we had decided, we looked at what were our beliefs, and we said, we believe that God decides who gets pregnant, not us. If we're good little Chicanas and worthy, we'll get pregnant. If we're not, we won't. And even if we're bad Chicanas, we might get pregnant, but it's never our decision that we have to get married. So when we came across, as I'll say later, we came across literature that taught us that it's not that God decides, is that we don't know how to control our reproductive life. And then we began to learn what that was. So our advocacy issues, the two ones that drove us was a high dropout rate of Chicanas, and women, how the lack of access to birth control contributed to the high dropout rate of Chicanas. Mm-hmm. Then the Chicanas de Aztlán worked with UMAS and Mecha to build a department, and we started a book club to find out about our history. It evolved into a college curriculum committee to establish Mexican American department, and we finally got it in 1969, the fall. The Chicanas de Aztlán, we were eager to take these new classes, but we were frustrated to find out the department excluded women from its curriculum. When we asked the faculty to tell us about the Chicana, the department ignored us, laughed at us, and then they began to silence us when we began to criticize the readings. We were accused of being disrespectful to our Chicano and Mexican intellectuals. They attempted to silence us by questioning our loyalty to the goals of the movement. They said our criticisms made us look as if we were allies with those who wanted to destroy the Chicano Studies departments. Consequently, Chicana de Aztlán decided we would do the same thing we did when we organized the department. We searched for information about our history. We learned about Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz in the Spanish department and identified with her struggle and eventual silencing of her ideas and intellectual pursuit. Then in the stacks of the library, I found a book that detailed the roles of women played in the Mexican Revolution. I learned that women organized themselves and fought for democratic rights and women's emancipation. And then I shared this information with the Chicanas de Aztlán. When we studied it, we talked about it, and we decided that to change our names because to Hijas de Guatemala because these women verified and validated that our legacy was that of being agents of change. Next, I went to La Raza newspaper, found stacks of newspaper from all over the United States, and I brought them to the Chicanas in Longo, and we began to realize that here Chicanas were Chicana feminist writers, and they were writing about what Chicanas thought, what they were doing, and what they considered the issues. And they inspired us because we thought we were the only ones who thought these things. And we were always under pressure to say, you're acting like white women, you're just women's livers, you're not being loyal, you gotta follow the line. And so these essays that we saw in the Chicano press broke our isolation. And we realized that this was a Chicana feminist press. And then we decided to do what the department had failed to do. We would join this Chicana feminist press. And we decided to make Chicanas visible, reveal their history, document what women were saying, what they were doing, recognize their leadership, identify their issues, and to mobilize women and empower themselves to act. This was our goals in Hijas, the Hijas de Guatemala newspaper. We continued the very same philosophy in the classroom and in our writings and our publications.
Thank you, Ana. And there's so many resonances with the other experiences of women here on the panel. So I think to structure the conversation a little bit, I'll turn to Las Chicanas de San Diego, and then we'll wrap up with what y'all were doing up in Northern California, because I really want to get a sense of the span across California. I know this trajectory is familiar to both Sonia and Enriqueta, because you face many of the same challenges. Would either of you like to discuss that, or both of you?
Sure. Las Chicanas de San Diego basically is the same thing that Ana, was talking about. We would go to meetings and say the same thing the guys were saying, but we weren't heard. But right next to us or right after us, a guy would say the same thing, and everybody would applaud and agree and say, yes, yes, yes. Mm-hmm. So we started off doing study groups to teach each other how to speak, to learn about the issues, so that when we spoke, whether it was at meetings or wherever we were presenting, we made sense, and we would be heard, because we had researched our information, and we know that what we were saying was true. The other thing is that supporting each other as Chicanas was really, really important. Just like it is now, there's there's a lot of competition. And for us to create a group where we could actually really support each other, get to know each other, get to know our ideas. And that was really important for us. And I think that was the beginning of Chicana Studies, where we would actually come together, learn about the issues, learn how other people, not only in the state of California, but all over the world, third world women. I mean, we were so interested in what women in China, in Cuba, in other countries, Mexico, like Ana mentions, the readings of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. All those things were very, very important to us. And they were things that we had never learned. We had never been introduced to. So this was all new information to us. And it was important in empowering us so that we could voice our opinion and begin the process of self-determination. And I think that for us here in San Diego was the beginning of Chicana Studies.
Just to jump into what Keta was mentioning, I think you have to envision the the surroundings or the landscape that we were confronted with. San Diego at that time, you're talking about the late 60s, 1968, has always been a military town, very conservative. At that time, that was when the civil rights movement started kicking in and the free love, or whatever you want to call it. So you saw from very extreme, like you see now, very conservative Minutemen, to people that, the free love, and it would always try to pit the women against each other. For instance, you, like Ana was mentioning, you want to be like the white women, take off the bra and all this bullshit, that it was a thing to get us upset. So what we started doing was we started planning, for instance, at some of the meetings. Keta, do you remember some of the things that we would do? For instance, that one of the things that would happen all the time, if a woman said something and they wouldn't listen, then they would, the guy would say the same thing. So what we started doing was we just kind of started taking over the meetings, physically and verbally. We went to a little bit to extremes that was considered at that time, because we were taking self-defense classes at that time. So we would walk in as a group and make our presence known. In other words, we took steps that were harsh to make our presence and our voice, because the other way wasn't working, right? So I just wanted to kind of interject that.
Tell them what you did. Tell them what you did. With the metro, what did you do? Tell them the
Well,
story.
at that time,
The men out.
at
Go
that
ahead.
time, I was already a black belt in karate, Tang Soo Do, and we had agreed, the Chicanas, that the next time that a guy would not, or a machista, a male machista would not let the women speak, that we would take care of him. And so there
We did.
was, an incident where a Chicana was trying to voice her opinion. I believe it must have been Felicita Nunez. And they were, like making fun of her and cowing her and just not paying attention. So a group of us went over and picked up the guy that was the main one,
The
picked him
metro
up
chair, the metro chair.
and took him outside and carried him outside. And we said, you're staying out here until you can respect women. So we took care of business our way.
That's right. I love that story. I was thinking about this trajectory that you have outlined so far, beginning with the consciousness raising sessions, and how those kind of evolved really into challenges to the curriculum, challenges to the department to be more diverse in terms of gender representation at all levels. And I was thinking, I know Concilio Mujeres was started around this time too, Dorinda. And, why did Concilio come about? Is it similar? Are you seeing resonances and echoes?
Oh,
in
yes,
stories?
very much so. Yes, yes. Well, as I mentioned before, San Francisco was just a golden place to work because we had so many strong women from everywhere in all of the organizations, but they were not necessarily Chicanas, and the Latinas were a little slow as well to come in, because they're, after all, coming in from Central America and South America with very different issues than what we had here in the United States. But the sisterhood developing across ethnic lines, like with the Alcatraz occupation, we had to meet everyone where they were at, whether they were coming from the boarding school experience and coming to live in cities from the reservations, And I was mobilizing between San Francisco and Davis, very much so in that time. And so it was different methods of communication and curriculum development, and learning more the policies and the issues that got us all in the San Francisco post-strike era. Los Siete was happening with Basta Ya, which was a Central American issue. The abortion issue was very strong, and we worked with a grouping of women in particular that was put in prison for, I think, 10 years under Dianne Feinstein's. So it was a cross mixture of, but we tackled them all at the same time with all of the different organizations that we were all learning from. And the way that we dealt with it was developing the newspaper La Razón Mestiza. And we did a couple of special issues with Union Wage on labor. That was also following an important Chicana conference that happened in San Jose. And at the same time as the Teatro Campesino was developing the United Farm Worker response to organizing and teaching through theater, the women in our group said to announce, we're going to start a teatro, and we're going to be using your poetry, and you're going to be the director. So that went on for a good 10 years, and we traveled everywhere, including the 1975 decade of Women's Congress in the GDR. And I was teaching by that time at Ohlone Junior College, at the same time at Napa Junior College, 1 day a week in each. And so I was traveling back and forth, and the students all put, I put 2 64-page specials, including one that we did for the Chicana Issues Conference with Irene Tovar and Governor Brown. So what we were learning and doing and acting was developed into stories and ways in which it reflected in the different communities. And that made up the 64-page editions. We also worked very strongly in media. The Norma Burgos, Boricua, Juana Montgomery worked at Channel 7. So we were helping people get trained and onto working in the stations, including KQED and the Spanish language news as well. The women they were slow to accept us, but there was, some terrific reporters during that time, and always covered what we were doing at the university and at the schools. So those were interesting times that did not come without its problems with the men. For example, I remember Dennis Banks, and he thought of Chicanos as Spanish, So being Indian stopped at the border. They did not really understand the indigenous people coming from Central and South America. And so all of those friendship associations really had to be worked out, person by person, issue by issue, organizationally working together across the media, and having a few wins. And we didn't have many. We have more losses for our energies and wins. But Margaret Cruz was a tremendous mentor to work with, and so working with the Mapistas, and there were always issues because we students seemed to be more radical because we wanted to push things forward. and some of the more conservative, I don't know, LULAC, MAPA, they seemed so, but the longer we proceeded with our energies and with just building friendships and relationships, the closer we became as working across the lines. We were also so close with UC Berkeley. So San Francisco State and UC Berkeley had a lot of support to one another during the free speech movement, and Corazón del Pueblo, Josefina Lopez, who has been one of the madrinas of our efforts. Well, her daughter was in Las Cucarachas, as was her husband and her son, who played the men that sort of were driving us around and really acting as our transportation. A man that I'm so proud of, who worked with the United Farm Workers, composed some 300 songs and ballads for the farm workers, and he would come with his harp to play for Las Cucarachas. He was so honored to do that. And I just remember the last time that I saw him alive, because he had diabetes and he just couldn't go through that process any longer. We went to see Dolores Huerta when she was at San Francisco General after being attacked by the police and rupturing her spleen. And Don Pedro Hernandez, myself, and the father of Carlos Santana all met at one place, so worried about Dolores. And that was the last time I saw the two. They passed away right after that. Dolores, strong at 93, is it? Is just a hero for all of us. And I think we were more active in action and in the cultural and performing arts and the communications than we were scholastically in the university, because we had Dr. Hayakawa, who was not an easy man to work with in ethnic studies, but our associations across lines with all of the departments were so strong that we were able to turn 3 positions into a whole department, because we only had pay for 3 positions, and a lot of our maestros and maestras, a lot of it was volunteer and extra to the faculty. And so just teaching lobbying to teach the La Raza Women's class was a drama. And one of the men said, I want you to stand up on the table and show us your legs. That's how dumb the conversations became as far as the men. And I felt a little like the Putney Swope, where everyone who had a vote, because not everyone could vote, but everyone could have a vote, they made sure that we saw their hand go up, because the women had them monitored as to they were going to vote for the women's class. And so we got our class, and it's still going today. And I've had many associate friends, comadres, who have taught the class through time. And it's, I think personally it might be a little dwindling, but I think this work that we're doing now in the 50th, I think that's going to inspire so much, because that's been a principal point in our organizing, was to support ethnic studies, to fight wherever, like the 100 writers that were banned in Arizona by Arpaio, to fight against those instances, because they influenced so many. They influenced the whole Wright and Koch brothers oppression of La Raza writers and scholars. And I really feel strongly that we've turned that corner and we're on the winning edge. We've lost a lot in the past, but there's so much to look forward to based on just the collective work of you panelists. Yeah, it's just that vitamin that we need to go forward toward the next 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, Dorinda, I just wanted to add to that because one of the most important things you said for you was teatro and performance. And teatro and performance is what really moved me. So I'm back to the 70s because as students, we came there and we were just struggling with who we were and what had hurt us in our lives and what trying to move forward. But Dorinda had done this amazing performance at the university, and she stood up and spoke to.
I'll show you.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, please. She's 6 feet tall. She's absolutely gorgeous. Her hair came down just like you see it. She brought in the indigenous, which was really important to us because we weren't going to exclude the Indian mother. We weren't Hispanic, 100% Hispanic. So this was really important to my life. And I want to just thank you, Dorinda, because what she did is she said she wanted to speak to the elements of the culture, and the elements of the culture were our own mothers. And she talked about how our mothers rocked us and she imitated the sounds and she just brought healing to our bodies is really what she did. The next thing she did is talked about the injustices and using the salt of the earth, women's voices and dialogue. She brought in their cry for formula. She brought in their cries for justice and running water for women and help for the miners. And I was just absolutely amazed because my family was also from New Mexico. And I think that opening part really touched me to the point of wanting to be involved. And that's how I got involved. At Stanford, there was a coalition. It was called the Chicano Coalition. And the coalition was an assistant to the president for Chicano affairs, which was really amazing because my English professor, and he was the only Chicano on campus, Chicano English professor on campus, was teaching a course. And I was reading all of the British American writers, and even the women's literature excluded us. There was no Gabriela Mistral, even as a background. And so what happened is in this coalition, we formed another committee to hire an assistant to the president for Chicano affairs. And we hired Cecilia Burciaga, a Chicana. And this Chicana woman came to the campus and things began to change and moving began to happen. I didn't know what I was going to do with my 2 children that I was raising. How could I spend more time with them? How could I be involved in the community? But what happened was I had to draw upon my own sort of strengths or focuses that I had come for, and that was to study English. So I decided that what I would do is I would teach a course for Mexican-American freshmen incoming English. Stanford had no resources for the young people that were coming in from all over the nation, and yet there was not a course for them to identify themselves. So it was up to us in the coalition to begin to make sense of what was going on and to put some action into it. The coalition had to decide what we needed and what we were going to do next. So I taught that course, which was amazing to me because I never expected to do anything like that. I never thought of it as a first or anything. It was just something we had to do because it was needed and somebody had to do it. The next thing that happened is I found out that there was a fellowship for, I was now a graduate student, and there was a fellow in English, and there was a fellowship program called the Chicano Fellows. And so what I did is I heard that no women had ever been invited to be a fellow or chosen to be a fellow, or maybe even applied. We didn't even know what to do. We were supposed to make a project at the university, and we were just beginning to identify what our strengths were. So I decided to propose a course for Chicana women. It was called Mexican American women. It was called Mujer de la Raza. And I took that title from actually Antonia's first course just to honor her, because she gave me, which were all my supplies, she gave me a box, and it was full of Xeroxes and articles and cutouts from newspapers. And there was this other machine we used to use. It wasn't even a Xerox. It was called a mimeograph. And you had to, it was purple ink, and you had to turn it. And well, that we didn't have any books. So I'm just sort of telling the people that are here today that we had no books. We had to make our own books. I tried to make a book out of some of the Xeroxes. I put hard covers from the bookstore on them to make them look like real books. And that was the first course in Chicana Studies. Chicana Studies at Stanford University. And that was 1973. And then I guess from that point, it just starts to develop, because what are we going to do next? What's important? And I know one of the questions that Maria had asked is, what's our philosophy as teachers? What was our syllabus like? Well, my philosophy was writing, because I didn't go outdoors with the others to protest in the streets like was happening. And a lot of people were doing that. And I felt like, am I not contributing enough? And then I decided that writing would be my gift to the students. And so what was important was we didn't have any books, we didn't have any writings. So I decided that publishing and writing was first on the list. And so I started promoting that idea, which was really alien to most of us, because we had never thought we could even have an article in a newspaper. We were so ignored. And so we published a first journal. I proposed in this Chicano Fellows program, a women's journal. So students turned in their writings, and a journal came out called Imágenes de la Chicana, Imágenes de la Chicana. And so when I got to San Diego State University, because leaving Stanford, I connected with what Enriqueta Chavez and Sonia Lopez were attempting, but I was this sort of lone woman, because they had this huge group of women that were bonded, and I had come there, and a department was being formed. I was the only woman, well, actually the only tenure-tracked professor hired to teach the English courses. Their core courses is what they were after. And so I decided to gather together an editorial committee, and we published, it was called Visión, once again after that first course that was taught in Washington and then brought to California by Antonia, Visión de la Mujer de la Raza. And I did that because I wanted to honor the women that had been there before, the Sonia Lopez, Enriqueta, and other women that had given so much and had moved into a different area because the university was making certain demands that they weren't quite ready to meet yet, or they didn't approve of. The university wasn't listening to their needs either. So Visión was a way that I was useful to me at Stanford and to the students. And so I was able to introduce the idea to the students at San Diego State, and that's what happened. We published another journal and then a third journal in conjunction with Stanford, from San Diego State and Stanford. So those were some of the connections that were happening The women here, I'm just absolutely amazed when I hear you talk, because you started it. I came in as this broken young mother and was nurtured by all of your spirits and your heart and your welcoming, and we'll never forget that. And thank you very much.
So Maria, I just want to add something, because a lot of young students or younger women are on the Zoom. Ana and I started, there was no classes, okay? There was nada. So we established the Chicano, the African American, or the Black studies and the Asian studies. I don't know why we did it, Ana, but we would just write. You know, we didn't have a publishing house. We didn't have the academic learning and skills to be, you know, articulate a lot of things formally. But I think it's important for the young people to realize, you know, just to write what you feel, what you experience, what's really you. And now, Ana, it's all come back today, you know, Encuentro Femenil and articles, the Civil Rights Commission articles, and La Raza with, that was an all male thing. And Ana and I were typing away and learning to write. So it's just good to, apart from the formalization of Chicano studies and also Chicana studies, there was some groundworks that we just wrote to express what we were experiencing and how we could improve our situation, because we knew we were really being discriminated against pretty significantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love this. You know, you've segued us into questions that many people in our audience are interested about, and with the nature of these sort of early Chicana feminist classes. And I just, you know, to sort of give a sense of the context here, we're talking about, you guys have been talking about, you know, basically between 1969 and 73. And we know that, you know, some of the first Chicana classes were taught, I think in 1972, right? And is that the first, or 71? Is that right, Ana?
Yeah.
At Northridge in the fall of 71? And so I would love to, we just have a few minutes more, because we do want to give a little time for questions. And so it's, I don't know what to, we have like, let's say 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. What
to talk
you-
about the classes.
Can you
Yeah.
not get to talk about Concilio, because that's how I got my job? And can she talk about Concilio and
You mean
the caucus?
this, the part that was going to be the middle part of our talk that we didn't get to? I mean, I can say very quickly, I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge, I think you're absolutely right, that the Chicano Coordinating Council for higher education was an incredibly important organization that all of you were involved in, except I think for Rita, you know, because between 69 and 71, you know, CHES sponsored the Santa Barbara conference. CHES sponsored the follow-up conference in San Diego, where the Chicanas, the ad hoc committee was formed. And so, yeah, I mean, if we want to, Enriqueta, do you want to say a little bit, something about that San Diego conference, which was a follow-up conference to Santa Barbara that you helped organize?
Sure. Che came out of El Plan de Santa Barbara. El Plan de Santa Barbara was the beginning, and it was predominantly male dominated. All the workshops, all the presenters, everything was all male. But Che was created to actually implement some of the ideas that were in El Plan de Santa Barbara. But I think that the main idea was, how can we get Chicano studies throughout the state of California? How can we get Chicano studies throughout the United States? Because at that time, we were already beginning to reach out with the women's movement. We were attending conferences all over, not just in the United States, but in other parts of other countries. We were already communicating with Montel, which Corinne was working with, and position papers. And there were position papers coming out, and we needed to have a vehicle where we could bring all this information together and share it, so that we could become a stronger movement, not only for Chicanos, but for Chicanas. And Che became that. And we would have actually Che, the main part of the organization would actually meet every month, but every other month we would have conferences throughout the state of California. It'd be in the South, the Middle, the North, so we could bring in people from community colleges, from state colleges, from private colleges, from universities, together to begin to dialogue and discuss the ideas that were going on. And so that's basically the whole purpose of Che was to begin to share this information throughout.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and Enriqueta, you were, I mean, I've always argued that Che is an incredibly important organization for understanding women's activities, in particular in the formation of Chicano studies, because, you know, so many of you were involved in organizing these Che conferences, and you were even president in 1971 of Che, correct?
Correct.
So,
And Sonia was really involved. So was Ana Nieto, Corinne, Maggie was also involved. Organizations from throughout the state of California that were publishing information became a very important part to Che in terms of getting this information together.
right, and the model of networking and sharing information that Che was built on was also a model. I mean, I've done oral histories with all of you, and you talk about sharing, you know, information around Chicana studies in the developing field through these same networks. So I think it's a really important story. I want to finish up, and I want to give anyone a chance to say something about what it felt like to teach those Chicana studies classes. We don't have a lot of time. We wanted to talk about Che. We wanted to talk about Corinne's work with Montel and the development of the first Chicana curriculum that Montel funded that research and that meeting and put that together. There's so many things that we could talk about, but you know, people have been asking about these first classes and what you did in them. So with the few minutes, you know, we maybe have 5 or 6 minutes left because we want to leave some time for questions. Could any of you, I'm just gonna, this is like open, oh, Sonia wants to say something. I'm gonna bring up your syllabus, Sonia, because we have one page from it as you talk. So what would you like to say about teaching these Chicana studies classes?
You're muted.
That's only happened once. That's a miracle.
You're muted, Sonia.
Yeah.
Unmute.
So I want to say that the class that I was responsible for, it was, I would say, a collective effort, because even though I was the person responsible in paper, I met with the study group or the women that were doing things in the movement at San Diego State at that time. For instance, in the class, the ideology or the perspective was, here we were, young women lost pretty much in terms of who we were and who we were going. So the class became a vehicle to meeting our needs as women, how to survive, not only day to day academically, but politically as well. So the class was geared in terms of addressing itself to survival of Chicanas on campus and recruiting the women that were coming in. So we had like an introduction class, we had an advanced class, and it was all about educating ourselves, who we were, where we were going. So you named the gamut of the curriculum. It involved history in terms of looking at the role of women from the beginning of time all the way to the historical narrative of the Indigena, the Mexicana, whether it was the revolution, whether it was economics, Keta would come in and do presentations on health, talk about abortion and birth control. I would have panels on machismo, get all the machos, the highest ranking machos in the movement, and have them come in. So that would draw hundreds of people into the class. The class became, of course, very controversial because we were dealing with a lot of controversial subjects, right? Guys were very proud of being the super macho. So this was a way to expose them, right? Open dialogue. So the things that I was looking at some of the assignments that we had. You've come a long way, baby. Know your enemy. Women in the welfare system, 2 jobs. Women in the Catholic Church, the law, media images, La Mexicana, macho attitudes, La Mujer Todavía Importa, you name it, we covered it. So we developed a second class to do research. The class was about learning, connecting it to the community. So a lot of the main project was that you had to do a project in the community, whether being involved in a clinic, being involved in a school, you would come back, do projects. So you named it, we covered. Keta, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, it wasn't just all about ideology. We wanted to become strong, self-determined, and understand where we were going. But we also had community involvement. Through the Chicanas class, many things started, like a escuelita for our children, a child care center, like Sonia mentioned, the clinic. Many of the activities, many of the things that happen here in San Diego were not because, but we were involved in the community. And I think that that's a very important part, that it's not just learning about it, but putting into practice what you're learning.
And I wanted to say a little bit too about that, Enriqueta, about how our course was managed. And because there was a focus on writing, I wanted to sort of make that segue into what happened to us. We all, almost every one of us here has written and published something. And then some of the things that we've taught in our classes were actually, so the students could go out into the community and they could study the meaning of culture and what that was, and to help some of the students who hadn't developed a consciousness or hadn't understood, to help them know that none of us comes to consciousness or are born with it. We all develop consciousness. So this was so important. And then Corinne, and one of your questions about Corinne and NietoGomez's Encuentro Femenil and how it affected our lives was that we never used the word feminist before. We didn't want it to be part of our culture because we didn't want to adopt or adapt something from the white culture and just use it without understanding what it meant. But Ana and Corinne helped us understand what that meant. And when I did the journal at San Diego State, I invited Ana to write about that. So the students could witness and understand a new word that they'd never seen in print before. And so just trying to develop the community activities that were so important to us and to get students to understand the meaning of them. Students could go out into a community. It could be, say, a Chicana organization, for example, that they'd never heard of before. And they had to study the meaning of culture, and that they had to ask questions. It isn't something that they could impose their own thought upon. And they had to listen so that we could come to some kind of an understanding of what the culture was about, instead of putting a judgment upon it. Narrative was important because students had to come to understand their own selves. And so I love doing a narrative project in which the students had to come to terms with some change in their life that led them into a new direction, that caused them to have to make an important decision, and that was life-changing. And the students really loved that project.
It's for sure very evident in many of the contributions to Imágenes, your first class anthology. And I just wanted to point out, I mean, it's so fascinating that we don't have enough time to talk about this, but if you look at Julie Ruiz's syllabus from 74, it is exactly pulling from what Ana was talking about, you know, the movement press and Chicana publications in the movement press, because that was basically the, you know, that was the bibliography of Chicana studies. What was being published in Las Hijas, what was being published in, you know, Inside the Beast, in special issues that, you know, women's issues in Regeneración, you see it right here. And I do think that, you know, the idea of publishing in a class and through a class, El Popo Femenil is an excellent example of that, because it comes out of this long process. I won't get into it. You know, I want to leave time for you guys and your voices on this. I don't know if you want to say just a few words about El Popo and how that came about, because it is a very interesting case study of using your class to do what Rita is talking about. Ana.
Well, I started teaching Chicana Studies in 1971, and my position was a direct result of the Chicana Caucus, the Chair Chicana Caucus, because they made an affirmative action proposal which Chair adopted, which included equal representation of Chicanas as faculty and educators. And they said they recommended that Chicano Studies should offer a class and make a Chicana class a requirement for graduation. There was only one problem. There was no Chicana Studies classes, and there were no materials about Chicanas. So our job as Chicana teachers, because we were all the first teachers, was one, develop the curriculum. Where were we going to get the curriculum? Well, we couldn't do it alone. So we enlisted the students. We inspired them, or just the topic itself inspired them to help produce and materials to build more Chicana studies. And when part of my classes, by the way, I was able to teach contemporary issues of the Chicana, history of the Chicana, La Familia, and third world women, a comparative study of third world women and the history of the Chicana in the United States. And from each time I taught La Chicana, the students came up with projects, because that was I made it a requirement. I tried to make sure that the class followed the model Corinne and I had experience, was incorporate activism as part of a class project. And so the first year they had a workshop, and that workshop, the result of that workshop, they made a proposal, Chicano Studies, that they make the class that make 2 classes a la Chicana be a requirement for Chicano Studies majors there at Northridge. The second year, I forget the second year, but the third year, 1973, the women did an independent studies class. They came to me and they said, we want to do a Chicana conference. And so under the class of Chicana independent studies, they organized a Chicana conference, which was one of the choices I gave them in the class. Do a newspaper, do a conference, do a workshop. Let's study about this and talk about it and publish it. And so they organized La Semana de la Mujer, and they documented what these women did. And these women were community speakers from welfare rights, women in the prisons, women in employment, women on health. Enriqueta was one of the speakers. I don't remember the rest, but then they got the Chicana at the time who led this. She was the president, ASB president at Northridge. And she helped get the ASB body to fund this newspaper. And it documented what occurred at the conference. And it was part of the goal was to document this and save this for the next Chicana Studies class and to help build a knowledge about who were these Chicanas. Because one of the most important things about bringing Chicana speakers was it broke the stereotype. It wasn't just external society that was stereotyping us. We had our own stereotypes of the women. And so each time we saw these speakers who were varied in ages and they varied in different points of view, but they were dealing with issues of child welfare, child care, welfare rights, education, employment. And each time they shattered that stereotype of what a Chicana was, and that imbued in the Chicana students, we got to know more. We have to create a total diversity of who we are as a group of women. And so that's how the newspaper came about. But we needed more than that. And we needed materials like Rita was saying. I think everybody was saying, you needed materials, you needed a further in-depth study about what Chicanas thought, what were the issues about Chicana thought. And so that's how Encuentro Femenil came about, is that we encourage women, the students, to write about the issues that they wanted to write about. We first started out, like Corinne said, we typed out these to the best of our ability, then we whited out any errors that we had, and we published it out of our own funds. And then Francisco said, why don't you make the next journal a little bit more professional looking? I said, oh, okay, but how do you do that? And so she helped us and guided us. And then it was more expensive. The first one cost $250. We could afford that. But the other one, I don't remember how much it was, but it was more than that. And so we had a big fundraiser, community fundraiser, and through the Chicana Service Action Center and Comisión Femenil, they helped raise money to pay for the second journal. And that and it was a wonderful experience. But that, as a result, we produced 2 journals that talked about education, employment, welfare rights, women in the prisons, women in literature. And that became in such demand. There were Chicanas starting Chicana classes all over the country, and they wanted this book. They needed materials. They had fought their way to get a Chicana Studies class, but they didn't have materials. And Encuentro Femenil was one of their first vehicles they used to promote a class and to begin.
In 1999, all those articles, and many of those articles and articles by all the women that have been here, showed up in a New York publication called Chicana Feminist Thought, the early Chicana writers. And so it just grew and developed and blossomed, and it's amazing to observe.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, it's important to mention Alma Garcia's book, which is a collection of many people right here in front of on this virtual stage were contributors to that book because their work was republished in that really important anthology. I want to leave room for questions. You know, every one of you knows that I could stay here and talk to you all night. Not everybody has that kind of stamina. And I know you could also talk all night to me. So we are definitely of the same kind. But, you know, I want to give folks an opportunity to ask questions. We, in fact, do have 2 questions. Is that right, Reina? Do you want to moderate the question?
Sure. So we do have 2 questions. I'm going to start with this one from Eva, that is about higher education. So Eva asks, what was it like to get jobs in higher education as Chicanas?
We needed mentors. We needed orientations. We were the first and there was nobody before us. And so we needed always, that's the one complaint I get from everybody that's ever taught. We were trying to figure it out on our own. What does the university want? What are we supposed to do? And so we had to gather together to make our own mission statements and to try to figure out where we were going to go next. And I think having orientations would have been a wonderful plan.
Well, at San Diego State, Chicano Studies became an organization that was run by the Junta Directiva, which was run by Mecha. And Mecha did a lot of the hiring and firing for the department. And we had received that autonomy from the university. It didn't last for very long, but we did have it. The thing is that we were not graduating students in Chicano Studies fast enough to be able to teach these classes. And so I was one of the first ones, and so was Sonia, that got our degrees in Chicano Studies, and that's why we were able to teach the Chicano Studies classes. But I think that that was one of the harder things. In higher education overall, it was a totally different story. You didn't see any Latinas in higher education teaching, maybe in social work, or nursing, or some of the more traditional women's occupations or women's professions.
We were the first Chicanas in higher education.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were. We were the first ones, and it was really hard to try and get Chicanas to graduate with their Chicano Studies majors so that we can begin to start filling these positions and these roles. And so that was an important thing for us to do, to mentor.
I just want to say thank you because I, as Dionne mentioned, did my BA and my MA in Chicano Studies. My first class was Chicana Feminism with Profa Dionne Espinoza. So I want to personally take this moment to say thank you. And I love the story about Rita making your own books and like creating your own textbooks is so powerful and so empowering, amazing. Yeah.
And we're still doing it, right? We're still doing it.
Sonia, you're so right, because we got together to publish a book to honor all these women we knew that
definitely
never been recognized before. There it is. Sonia's got a copy of it, Chicana Tributes, Women Activists from the Civil Rights Movement. And I like the second part, which said these are stories for the next generation. So these are stories for the youth that are in the audience, because they're the ones that don't know the history. Who could possibly know it? 50 years has gone by. But there it is. It's in a book, and all these amazing women. So publishing can reach out to others, and we can be a part of that. And that's very affirming.
I wanted to say that Maria has a picture of most of us women who were sitting together at a conference in San Francisco. And I think that if I don't cry, I think that picture exemplifies the, what did we do together? We developed Chicana thought, Chicana vocabulary. I remember hearing just a matter of factly Enriqueta talking about hermanidad, not hermandad, but hermanidad, sisterhood. And we all accepted it was an idea that we all had. And wherever I went, I heard Henry's voice, Sonia's, Corinne's. I didn't know Rita until I met her after I had my baby. So when she had a conference over there, and she helped rescue me, helped me take care of my, well, it's a long story, but anyway, Everybody, we played an important role in keeping us and helping us grow what I call Chicana thought, in keeping us fortified and being soldiers, in defending the right to think differently, defending the right to create a new field of study. And I'm so happy I've met you all.
And there's a wonderful book by you out there too that's just absolutely challenging. What's the title? Tell us, Ana, about your experiences.
What's the title of the book we're working on? I
Oh,
don't remember. Oh, we were Chicana scholar activists, I think. Or is that a book?
I'd like to say something about the 50 years to come and the work that we've been doing
Yes.
over the last couple of years on the 50th anniversary, which we call Proyecto 50, 50 si cuentan, because they mattered. And so we've been putting a magazine together, and we expect to have it for International Women's Day 23. And one of our important projects that we hope that all of you will support and be part of in your own ways, however it could happen, is the 70th anniversary of Salt of the Earth. So there's partners coming together on that. The granddaughter of Rosada Revueltas, Eva Bodenstadt, and the son of the producer, Paul Jericho, William Jericho, is amongst our mentors putting this together. And Mexico, for the first time, is going to be celebrating the film, because Silver City has taught Mexico to appreciate Rosada Revueltas and the film Salt of the Earth. I hope that one day it can be at least, if not translated, at least to have the dialogue. But anyway, that's going to be announced for steering committee people to work with us. Yolanda Nava is the spokesperson for that project, and also for our project Mujeres de las Americas, which is bridging the women, specifically because of the interchange that we've had, at least over the, well, since actually El Salvador and Nicaragua and the Contras and all of that era has brought so many people having to come to the to Norte, because they can't even live in their own land anymore because of the US military complex and interventions in those countries. So the problems at the border are so profound, and so many great people organizing around those issues. And our magazine is trying to illuminate the most important projects that have come about by our North-South issues of perhaps not always understanding the politics of it. The arts has helped. Our associations with Mascarones and El Teatro Campesino over time have helped. And so those exchanges of literature and poetry and danza and ballet folklorico and mariachi, all of the things that we did not have in the school systems are now being introduced appreciated through ethnic studies. And so it has gone from the university to the community and back to the university, and strengthening together in that period of half a century. So we want the magazine to reflect that we are the spoken word collaborative, introducing them to what we did and did not do in these first 50 years onto what are the possibilities of the next 50. So we're promoting the United Nations Declaration on the decade of protecting and preserving the indigenous language. And just like the decade of women and the decade of the children, this decade of Indigenous language that started last year, oh no, that started this year, excuse me, I'm in the new year already, and will go on for the decade. And so we have beautiful energy together that's going to go on and on to our next projects. And some of us will make it into those years. Dolores Huerta is certainly an image that we can appreciate, who lived into her 90s, and we will be around for a lot more time with all the energy that you've expressed today. So thank you, and for who you are and how we can work together in the projects to come.
Thank you, Dorinda.
Thank you so much. We do have one more question. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask it, and maybe we can have a brief response. So one second. So this is from Alejandro Prado. I want to thank you all for the talk today. In my research and in the talk, I learned that many of the speakers here went to China in the 80s, and I wanted to know what was the relationship cultivated and what did Maoism, if anything, mean to you during that time? Gracias.
I went to China in 1976. Mao was still alive, and with Cani Pardo. We both were law students at the time and partners in crime. But it was very awareness for all of us in seeing not just the philosophy of China at the time, but seeing women in non-traditional jobs, seeing women across the board as leaders, as panelists. When we went there, we went via Canada because the United States did not have a relationship with China at the time. And we went with the People's Friendship Association of China. So it was a philosophy that was talked about equality and women equal to men, and we saw it firsthand. Of course, we were about 30 of us, but it was very enlightening. We're there 22 days. And as I said, the women we saw not only non-traditional jobs, but they were speaking to us in English and had translators in English. We saw them in all the realms of leadership. Now, you could say they show you the best side of whatever in the country, but Connie and I were able to observe outside of the tour group the same kind of leadership of women in China when we went outside of the group slightly. But travel is an education, and certainly China at that time, I was still alive, was quite awakening for all of us.
As a result of Connie's and Corinne's trip to China, they got me a scholarship to go to China the following year. At that time, I was unemployed. I had lost my fight for tenure in Chicana Studies at Cal State Northridge. And I was looking for a job. I was a single parent mother and looking for a job. And they offered me this scholarship to go with this group of women who were looking at the economic issues in China and comparing them with what women were doing in the United States. Most of these women were white, except for me and two Black women who belonged to the Negro Women's Black Church. And so we went and we studied that very thing. And at looking at that, we saw the accomplishments of the communist revolution and what women's role was before the revolution, during the revolution, and after the revolution. When I came back, I had a friendship with a guy who was one of the leaders in the August 29th Movement Organization, which was a Maoist organization. He was in that organization. I was not. And he wanted to interview me and about women in China and to print it in their newspaper, August 29th. Now, at that time, there were many organizations that were interested in getting me to join their organization. These were leftist organizations. And I thought that they were too chaotic. Let's put it that way. So I did not have any relationship with August 29th other than my friendship with this guy. He hoped that I would eventually join their organization. But I told them, I gotta find me a job. Not unless you have a job that helps me find an apartment, pays for my apartment, pays for childcare, and helps me take care of my boy. And he goes, oh, I never thought of that. And I said, well, I do. So I went on. So sorry to disappoint you, but I really was not connected to that, unfortunately. There were other Chicanas, but that wasn't me.
Thank you so much. I want to take this moment to thank María Cotera for moderating this powerful talk, Dionne Espinoza for facilitating this amazing group of grandes, of Movidas. The energy was so beautiful, so illuminating, and I'm so thankful to have been a part of it. I also want to thank our audience members. They have been sharing words of celebration and affirmation for you. Don't worry, I copied and pasted it. I'm going to share it in case you missed it. Lots of saludos in the chat. So I want to thank our engaged audience that have been celebrating you this whole time while you've been sharing your powerful testimonies. And thank you for being founding educators in Chicana Studies. So gracias again. And please don't forget to fill out our survey for the event. The information is in the chat. Yeah, thank you so much.
Wait, before you go, how do I find out what the chat is? Where is the chat?
Oh, it's just down in the bottom. You can click where it says chat right next to share screen. And I've been keeping a log of all of the saludos and the words of affirmation and love. So we'll share that with you afterwards as well. It's hard when you're speaking your testimonio and the chat is going. So we'll share that with you.
And I just want to remind folks, if you could please fill out a survey. This is a way that we communicate to the people who supported this event that people want to hear these stories. So please help us out by providing your opinion on the survey that I put it in the chat like many times. So
we'll put it one more time.
Yeah, and you can always email me directly if you want to. I'll put my email here if you missed it and you want to fill out a survey later. So once again, thank you to our panelists here, to María Cotera and to Reina Rodríguez for helping to make this magic happen. And yes, thank you, as Reina said so well, thank you, those of you who are here. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.